listening to RainierAvenueRadio.world. Check us out on social media, Facebook and Instagram, RainierAvenueRadio.world, and on Twitter at RainierAveRadio.
Yo!
What up, though?
I got to talk. I gotta tell what I feel. I gotta talk about my life as I see it.
All right, then. It's time for you to bring it to the table.
Turn up your radio wherever you at. We about to bring it.
StreetBeat
with Tony B.
For the next hour, Tony B will give you a chance to tackle local, national, and international issues that affect your community.
StreetBeat. Tony.
Good evening and welcome to this week's edition of Street Beat. It is me, your host, Tony B. This evening, the beat of the city will be a discussion with the hiring of Seattle's new street czar. Joining me on the program will be Mr. Andre Taylor. Andre is a university lecturer, public speaker, life coach, sharing his story of perseverance and redemption. I'll tell you a little bit about Mr. Taylor. In 2005, he published the book, The Road to Paradise, and has since been invited to speak on the Montel Williams Show on the Trinity Broadcasting Network. Andre's lectured at universities, spoken at prisons, and taught transitional treatment centers. Andre's brother, Shay Taylor, was killed by the Seattle Police Department in February of 2016. Following, Andre and Dove Taylor started the nonprofit Not This Time to assure that police killings would end. Not This Time brought Native tribes, Black organizations, Latino organizations, API organizations, and groups representing people with disabilities together to push for police accountability through policy change. That's important as we are in an election season, and to not everyone who understands the point of the political process is that you can change the circumstances. You can make your concerns and issues relevant to the electoral process and see that change come to light. Not This Time has garnered support of the U.S. Senator Patty Murray, U.S. Congressman Adam Smith, King County Sheriff Mitzi Yohanek, as well as Seattle's Community Police Commission and the King County Office of Law Enforcement and Oversight, and many others, as it works to create a more just use of force law in Washington. Mr. Taylor, how are you, sir?
I'm well. How are you tonight, Chief?
Under the circumstances, I'm fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to share a little bit of information about you from your bio. We're going to talk about this new position. I want to talk a little bit about how it's been described to me, again, from Sam Reed, who's the interim communications manager. Mm-hmm. According to Sam Reed, the information that I have is the city's Department of Neighborhoods entered into a contract with Not This Time, so the organization could help de-escalate the ongoing situation in and around Cal Anderson Park. Not This Time continues to act as an advisor to the city of Seattle and assist with community engagement that centers Black communities and other communities of color. Not This Time's expertise and services are intended to assist the city with de-escalation and community engagement, as well as provide recommendations on alternatives to policing. This contract is a continuation of a relationship established in 2019 when Seattle Department of Neighborhoods supported Not This Time's Conversations with the Streets. This was a series of community conversations aimed at reducing violence and healing communities. In recent years, the city has increased investments in community-based organizations and provide de-escalation services, alternatives to arrest and incarceration. In addition, Not This Time and other Black-led organizations with the city on community outreach and engagement strategies, particularly those that center Black communities. The city sought a contract with Not This Time because of Not This Time's existing working partnership, but also because of the organization's lived experience with the criminal legal system and the organization's successful advocacy of activism on issues of policing and dismantling systemic racism including serving as the chair of De-Escalate Washington, which helped pass Washington's Initiative 940. Do you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. It's easy to agree with the truth.
Your appointment was and is controversial for a number of reasons. You've agreed to have an open, honest, frank conversation with me. That's how we get down on Street Beat. And as we move into this conversation, some of the things that have come up are it is your relationship with the mayor that is the reason that you have been given this position. I'm going to read one of the headlines that came along with this hiring from Mark Stein on Fox News. The city of Seattle's hiring of a former pimp to act as the city's street czar and offer alternatives to policing is a joke. Your commentary to Como News. A street czar is a person who has particular genius in a particular area. You cited Obama's use of czars during his administration as inspiration for the title. And you know the term street czar is quite provocative. If you're a parent listening, I suggest this is a show that you listen with your child. If you're a partner who's listening with the partner, call some other partners, listen to them, listen with your parents. Bring your kids out to listen to this conversation. This contract will last 1 year in total, $150,000. And as we have this conversation on Street Beat, if you've not tuned into this show before, this is how we get down. We have open, honest, frank conversation. And though I will be practicing journalistic principles, I do have to say that if you are black, then your existence is controversial. If you are black, your mere presence can be radical, no matter what sphere of influence or life that you come from. And so I invite you all to listen to this conversation. If you'd like to join in, you can give me a call at 206-290-9685. 206-290-9685. Well, first of all, Mr. Taylor, congratulations.
I thank you. Appreciate you.
And let's talk about your goals. And you know what? Before we start that, just for folks who might, street czar, I referenced it as you referenced it to Obama's use of czars during his administration. And I know that when people hear the term street czar, that can be taken a number of different ways. So for you as a street czar, which is a title that, again, you came up with, let's talk about what that means and why you chose that as the representation of this position that you were hired for.
Well, every president uses certain czars. Sometimes they use education czars, drug czars, financial czars. So President Trump has czars also. President Obama and every president before him have used czars, people who have a specialty in certain areas. So I felt like, well, I have a specialty coming from the streets, right? And so I think that, this would be a great idea to coin this phrase, street czar, not only for our city, but to take a progressive transitional leadership position for the rest of the country that will also feel that they can install street czars of their own. I know a lot of unnamed street czars around the country. I've alluded to this before in videos, and that Big U out of California, who was one of the participants that I brought down for conversations with the streets, Big U is a street czar. Even though he's unnamed, what he does, he operates in the capacity of a street czar. And the reason why I say that is because Big U is known as a Rolling 60s Crip who has a great deal of credibility on the streets in Los Angeles. He was Nipsey Hussle's big OG, the rapper. And he went to prison, did his time, came out, transformed his life, started helping the city. And because of Big U, 80% of gang violence was reduced in Los Angeles, California. Well, Big U is a street czar. And there are other, as I've said, unnamed street czars all over the country. And I think it's a position, if cities want to get serious about holding conversations with community and city then somebody has to be a go-between person that can communicate the language of the streets, right, to the city and vice versa. So that's what a street czar is to me.
And what would you say to folks who say this is a dog whistle for I'm that main dude on the street and I'm running the streets in Seattle?
Well, my story has been well documented over 20 years of my life. I did a film with the Hughes brothers. They hired me to be technical advisor. Plus, I was one of the stars in a film called American Pimp back in the 90s. And it was a very influential documentary film. It actually went to movie theaters. So people know me, not just here in Seattle, that only has 3.5% population of Black people in the state, but from around the country. So I've always considered myself to be the chief sinner. So I just believe the Most High had his hand on my life to say that, listen, I'm going to take this chief sinner, I'm going to reform his life so that I can show that there is life after the streets, that you don't have to be defined by your past. You don't have to be defined by your mistakes. And so, you know, I often say this too, Tony. I didn't reform my life for white people. I care less what white folks think about me. I reform my life for my community, that I can empower young kids that are in those type of vices right now to show them that true enough, I was there and you knew I was there, right? But over 20 years later, I've been married 22 years this Saturday, right? I have a son that graduated Yale, a daughter who graduated UCLA. I am a success story, and you can also be that. But if they don't have anybody that could show them a transformed life, they're not going to listen.
You know, Andre, generally, America loves a redemption story. Have you found that to be the case with you?
Well, you know, as of late, the far left Seattle that believes in restorative justice and some form of redemption has been very hypocritical with my story. But because America does love a redemptive story, I've been able to lecture at universities. I've been able to teach at treatment centers. You know, I've been able to go on television to share my story on TBN on Montel Williams. I've been able to go speak at prisons. I've been able to be a published writer. So it hasn't stopped me because people mostly, you know, accept the idea that someone can conform their lives. As of late, there are some complicated things going on, and people, you know, like to use things over 20 years ago to try to sabotage or, you know, try to put you down. But again, I'm unconcerned about that. I didn't get as far as I got being concerned about, you know, what society thinks about me. As you said from the beginning, just being Black is problematic in this country.
My guest again is Mr. Andre Taylor, newly hired as Seattle Street Czar. We talked a little bit about what that meant, and let's talk about, you know, kind of what you have on your platform now. What are some of the first things that you want to do in this position as you get settled in? Again, this being an official position, you mentioned, you know, and I'm going to use the term street czars again, people who just in the community have that rep, that credibility. Are there other positions that you have to use as a guidepost about how to approach this? Or is this something that you're, again, as you work your way through this, you're building the blueprint for how to do this? That's a start. And then I want to talk about, you know, what you're doing. But are there other, again, let's just call them city hired official government positions that you can look to kind of have some kind of blueprint about how to move forward with this?
Absolutely not. But I can say that my organization, not this time, led the rest of this state with the largest people of color coalition in the history of this state, led Washington State in being the first and only state with a police accountability law. That hasn't been done. No one has ever done legislation in the whole country. We created history when we did it. It was the narrative from not this time that was able to bring that about by bringing all people together, from law enforcement, from politicians, from Asian Pacific Islanders and natives and Latino organizations, from unions and from politicians. So when people ask, you know, what government position is a guide to you? Well, government positions have been able to be successful at bringing real legislation in this state, but not this time has been able to do so with with the blueprint that I put forth, right? So yeah, I have that as a guide. And like I said, we created history in the country. And right today, Washington State has a police accountability law. Not only do we have a law, the first officer in over 45 years was charged in Auburn because of Initiative 940 for second-degree murder and first-degree assault. Had that law not been changed, we would not have been able to find that officer or charge him for murder, because Washington had the worst law in the country, because in order for us to hold a police officer accountable in this state, we had to prove that an officer had malice. That was in the law. Well, what is malice? That means we had to prove what an officer was thinking at the time of the killing, which is impossible. So for over 40 years, not one officer has been held accountable for the use of deadly force in this state, because that law was a de facto immunity. So no matter how bad a behavior a law enforcement officer's behavior was, we could not hold them accountable. Well, with 940, we changed that, and we see that it is working. So while around the country right now, people are trying to find out ways and to institute things like that, we have actually done it, and that was under my leadership.
Yeah, and you know what, Andre, I am going to get to my question again, which is, tell us about what you're going to do to get started with. But then again, as I am kind of meeting you over this phone call, if you are Black, there are, and I'm saying this to the audience, the normal process of success is not always available to you. As we know, there is this thing called systemic oppression that disconnects you from the spheres of influence, takes away hope. And if you don't have hope, then you don't work your way through that normal system. And if you are Black, you understand that when you have to use your intellectual property, then that is how you can rise even within a system. And, it's funny because after 20 years of doing major market radio, I am used to people thinking they gave that to me, not that I took every single inch of what I had from there. And again, I'm saying this as we have this conversation because we're going to get into some other things as well. But I wanted to be even-handed about this conversation because for some people it's going to be uncomfortable. For some people it's going to be brand new. So let's get into what your platform is and how you plan to approach your position as Street Czar. What are some of the things that you want to do? How do you plan to get this started? What should we expect to see from you maybe in 3 months or something like that?
So I want to give some clarity that I am not a city employee.
Right.
I'm a consultant. The city hires many consultants. When they were dealing with SPOG and the contracts of SPOG, they brought in these consultants from other states, gave them $500,000 for to do the work that they've done. Right. So just understand that this is not something that is out of the ordinary. As a matter of fact, as far as consulting work is concerned for a city, I'm very far underpaid because, as I've said, they came here in a matter of a few days, were paid $500,000 for their consulting work. So I just want to give some clarity to that because people seem to think that $150,000 is a lot of money. But when you're consulting for a city, it is minimal, So anyway, some of the things that we're working on now is mental and restorative mental health, right? Behavioral health, mental and behavioral health. I'm working with a guy named Gregory Jones, who has a company called Lucid Living, and Daryl Bell, who works for Union Gospel Mission. He used to be the director over what they used to call New Vision. It was a transitional treatment center for men. And so what we're working on kind of is like a FUBU model, right? For us, by us model, where you actually have Black professionals that are able to help people come out of prison that look like them, right? Where there is a comfort when you are, being able to go to an organization of people who are professionals that look like you, right? Sometimes if you're trying to transition out of prison and you're going into an all-white organization, you put your guards up because there's a lack of trust issues there. So what we wanted to do is create this model with Black professionals, right, to focus on transitioning, first meeting people in the prison, and as they're getting out, helping them transition out of prison. But as it was explained to me by Gregory Jones, it's an ABC model, right? A, you get out. C is the objective, but we're losing people at B. right? The recidivism rate is occurring at B because there's not proper services that are directed to the certain traumas that we have as a people that we've had in this country over 400 years. So we want to FUBU, for us, by us, the specific traumas that we are dealing with. And Gregory he's a nurse and he has expertise in behavioral and mental health. And Daryl, being a part of that New Vision project, we want to take them through that ABC and then help them process, right, by transitional homes where they could have a place to be as we're yet working with people over a period of time. This is not a one-day fix. This is something that you have to work with people through the process. And because I'm a Black male, understanding some of the trauma, right, we're able to really, really start off with our people not being so, apprehensive about sharing and communicating like they would in the white organizations. So we've been working at that for about two months. And sometime real soon, we will present that presentation to the mayor in the hopes that she could fund something like that.
My guest again is Andre Taylor, founder of Not This Time, and also, again, and you're right, it is consultant. Apologize if I connected you with the city in that way, but at the end of the day, the city's paying you. And a consultant, the position is called Street Czar. We're having a conversation now about what that is, what that would look like. And so, again, as we clarify what this is this a position where folks from the city, folks who just live here, go, hey, you know what? I want to contact this guy. And, I may need his assistance. Or is this something where people not necessarily can contact you directly? You do your work in a different capacity. Can you explain to me how that works?
So this is an ongoing process of Not This Time doing work almost 5 years in this city and state, right? The work of creating a space that never existed for families that have lost loved ones due to police violence, right? We created that space that wasn't there. So normally when somebody was killed by law enforcement, they had nowhere to go. What Not This Time did is when an incident happens, we immediately, we don't contact the family. We allow them to contact us because we don't want to look like we're ambulance chasing. So when that happens, we immediately put a legal team around families and we put other families that have gone through this process as support, right? And then walk them through this process of what this will look like. Because when my brother Shay Taylor was killed, we had nobody. We were traumatized. My family, we started fighting against each other, with each other, because we were traumatized and we didn't have no services or nobody to go to. And so I said, if it's in my power, I'll make sure another family will never have to go through what my family had to suffer through. So Not This Time has created this place for like 15 families, from Charlene O'Lyle's to Giovanni McDade's family, and the list goes on, of us supporting families, putting their stories at the forefront, giving them visibility, right? And that's what we did with Horace Anderson with his son during CHOP. He had a 19-year-old special needs son who he called me, asked me to help him because he wasn't getting any type of support or help. And I helped him. I gave him a platform. I took him on Hannity's show, gave him a national platform. But that's what we've been doing here for almost 5 years. So what we're doing is a continuation of the work. They're just allowing us, because our bandwidth was so small, they're just allowing us to continue most of the work that we're already doing in the city and state. We changed the inquest process, which before, when a family went through an inquest process, the police were giving law enforcement, but the families would go through the process without any, the police were giving attorneys, but the families were not giving attorneys. So we changed that and made sure that the county council made sure that every family going through an inquest process were able to receive attorneys from the city. That wasn't going on for decades. So there's a lot of things that we've been instrumental in doing, in changing things. And this is just accumulation and a continuation of the work. Again, Conversations with the Streets was very, very successful. We brought Black leaders and professionals from all over the country to have a conversation with this small demographic here in Seattle. Judge Joe Brown to Professor James Smalls to Dr. Frazier to Rizza Islam, just the list goes on the amount of people that we were able to bring here. And that was our first dealings with the city. And this czar position for my organization is just a continuation of the relationship we already had.
You're listening to Street Beat. It's me, Tony B, on RainierAvenueRadio.world. My guest is Mr. Andre Taylor, founder. Executive Director, is that the title too for Not This Time?
Yes, absolutely.
And Executive Director for Not This Time, and also a consultant to the city of Seattle with the title of Street Czar. Andre, when we come back, I want to talk about Initiative 940 and you working your way through the electoral process. We're also going to talk about, how the murder of your brother got this started. And then we're going to get also into some of the controversial aspects of your background that, I'm hearing.
Sure.
And I'm going to talk to you about. But as we're talking about you working your way through 940 and getting that passed, I want to remind everyone that we are about to start our 2020 Community Election Connection. Rainier Avenue Radio, your radio station, our community radio station. A big thanks. This whole process is powered by the Urban League of Metropolitan Seattle and SAS, Seattle Academy of Arts and Sciences. For the entire month, we are going to be bringing you interviews with candidates. We're going to be bringing in folks to explain the electoral process, how that works, how King County is supposed to keep your votes safe. We're going to share with you information about voter suppression, what that looks like. And we're going to, again, be providing you with classes. That's right. We're going to be offering you classes that are an hour apiece, 5 classes. These are geared towards high school students that we'll be offering in high schools, and you'll also be able to do them online virtually as well, that will teach you about the electoral process so that when you turn 18, it means something to you, and you'll understand why these down ballot issues like 940 are so important. So coming up next week, we're going to start kicking the week off with a candidate debate between Supreme Court Justice Position number 6, and we're also going to have, that'll be on Monday from 5 to 6, incumbent Justice G. Helen Whitner, and then Richard Cerns will be debating right here on Rainier Avenue Radio. This is Supreme Court Justice Position 6. That's Monday. Then on Tuesday, we'll be having a conversation with Whitney Keys of the Washington State Debate Association. They are the ones who are going to be holding the Washington State gubernatorial debate. We're going to also air that from 8 to 9 on Wednesday. And then on Thursday, the Urban League of Metropolitan Seattle will be hosting on Rainier Avenue Radio the Pierce County Black Candidate Forum, where you'll have the opportunity to hear from Marilyn Strickland, who is running for United States Congressional Representative in the 10th District. You'll also have the opportunity to hear from Tawana Noble, who is running for Washington State Senate in Legislative District 28. You'll also hear from Melanie Monroe, who's running for the state representative in the 28th District. All of them are black women. We'll be back to talk more with Andre Taylor right after this. Rainier Avenue Radio. The Urban League of Metropolitan Seattle, empowering communities and changing lives. The Urban League has been there to serve when our community is at its lowest. It's never mattered what the crisis was. The systemic oppression remains constant for those most vulnerable. Here at the Urban League of Metropolitan Seattle, we'll be temporarily adjusting our hours of operation and available services. If you are in need of resources, we recommend that you give us a call at 206-461-3792. To make an appointment, press 0 and speak with the receptionist. Walk-in hours will be from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. Monday through Friday. And hey, we'll gladly work with you via phone as best as we can if you're exhibiting any signs of illness to assist you with information to save your home, find you a place to sleep, or connect you to job opportunities. The Urban League of Metropolitan Seattle. That's 206-461-3792.
Crime nonsense conversation are we having here?
The Neon Ghost Show. The Neon Ghost Show. Right here on Rainier... what's it? RainierAvenueRadio.world.
Right about now.
RainierAvenueRadio.world. I'm so tired. I have to pee.
This is your RainierAvenueRadio.world community update on free online exercise classes. The YMCA of Pierce and Kitsap counties has launched more than 60 free online exercise classes and youth programs to support the health and well-being of the community. Classes include boot camp, yoga, weightlifting, boxing, tai chi, and more. Find classes at YMCA360.org. No membership is needed to access these classes at YMCA360.org.
This is the news on Rainier Avenue Radio.
The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention have issued new guidelines on how to celebrate Halloween safely. Unsurprisingly, according to NPR, door-to-door trick-or-treating and crowded parties aren't recommended. You can organize a small outdoor costume parade where everyone is 6 feet apart. An outdoor costume party would also be considered moderate risk if people wear masks and stay 6 feet away from each other. Haunted houses are out. The CDC says an open-air scarefest is moderately risky so long as the route is one way, people wear masks appropriately, and stay 6 feet apart. For the full list of guidelines, we highly recommend that you review the CDC's website.
And that's your news on Rainier Avenue Radio.
This is RainierAvenueRadio.world.
Welcome back to Street Beat. It's me, your host, Tony B. My guest joining me is Andre Taylor, founder and executive director of Not This Time, and newly appointed consultant to the city in a position called Street Czar. Andre, I want to go back to your brother is murdered. I want to start with that. And you kind of alluded to some of the processes as why you started Not This Time. But again, how did that impact you? How did that affect you? How did that change you, or did it change you at all?
Let me just say, people who know me from the streets and where I was at, they said, well, they knew enough to know that, you guys chose the right one, because they knew that I would be unrelenting in my pursuit for justice for my brother. Let me just say this for what he did, right? And he got out, and my little brother was, almost like a little son to me. I loved him so much, the apple of my eye. And he was out for, 16 months? And what people don't know, I haven't really talked about, but I'm going to talk about it with you, Tony, is that before he got out, he won a lawsuit against the DOC. He won $80,000. He came home with that $80,000, and the DOC is really unforgiving. We, in our family, talked about it and said we probably feel like something had to do with that, because the way they executed him. They said the reason they shot my brother is because he didn't comply. Well, there was an inquest process, and all the jurors unanimously agreed that my brother did comply. So when I had talked to the prosecutor down in Satterberg, I was like, well, is it my brother's fault that he was doing what law enforcement asked him to do? And based upon him doing what they asked him to do, they killed him? He complied. So they said they killed him because he didn't comply, but the jury agreed that he did comply. But there again lies that malice law. Of course, they said it didn't have anything to do with it, but it's had something to do with not bringing charges up on officers for 40 years. I didn't have anything to do with it, right? So I was determined to get some justice for him. But let me just say this, Tony. He was killed February 21st. I was on the plane the next day, the 22nd, coming back home. And, I had thought about that. We've been defeated so many times in our community by this system. And I figured out on that plane ride why we've been defeated. Because when there is an incident of violence, there's a reaction from our community. And sometimes those reactions are not positive. We can burn some stuff down, and that's only because of our historic trauma. But what happens is the media takes the attention off the initial shooting of the officer and then puts it on the behavior of the community. And we lose the narrative. And I said, Tony, not this time. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to be reactive. I'm going to be responsive. So the first week that I came here, I sat down with the chief of police. You know what I told her? I said, listen, I know I can't bring my brother back, but I'm still willing to work with you so that we can reduce the incidences of violence in the community. And I did that on purpose, Tony, because I wanted to elevate their engagement and then keep our narrative, keep the pressure on them. And with that narrative, I created Not This Time, where we meet, and we met for up to this day, almost 5 years, every Wednesday. We brought politicians, we brought law enforcement, we brought city council members, we brought community all together in one space to have a real productive conversation. I wanted law enforcement and politicians to tell the community their responsibility, and I wanted the community to learn how systems operate. And they operate by relationships. That's how they operate. So
go ahead. I'm gonna let you finish.
Well, I'm just saying that there is a lot of people that still don't understand how we were able to achieve what we achieved. Because the first thing they say is, you built with the police. I said, well, wait a minute. I built with Asian communities, natives, and politicians and law enforcement. And that's how we got the change. Because we didn't just go there playing from a position of weakness. We built power amongst ourselves and forced them to the table under our condition.
I'm going to fast forward here. Thank you for sharing. When you 940, let's talk about how that comes to be and the process of changing law and impacting again through the electoral process through and again, as I said before, determining how you can become part of if you're disconnected from the sphere of influence.
Well, one of the fundamental principles by which I live my life and how I run my organization is I don't believe I have to agree with someone 100% of the time in order to build with them. So that it's given me a lot of leverage to build with a lot of people, right? There are other people in our community that feel like if you don't agree with them, it's out of the question. That's foolish. I didn't agree with my father 100% of the time. I didn't agree with my brothers and sisters 100% of the time, right? So the beginning process of building those relationships were important. Very, very important, right? And controlling the narrative. So 940 started from my organization.
Why don't we tell them what 940 is for somebody who may not know?
940 is an initiative. In Washington State, if you don't like something, you can do what is called an initiative. You can do an initiative to the legislators, or you can do initiative to the voters, right? If you do an initiative to the legislators, either one of the initiatives, they require you to get a certain amount of signatures before you qualify, right, on this initiative. So we were supposed to get 260,000 signatures around the state in order for our initiative to qualify. Well, we got 360,000, right? And so just the process, understanding how politics work and how the system of white supremacy works is difficult within itself, right? What I mean by that is that, so when I first started, true enough, I had been lecturing at universities, but I didn't have a hold on politics, especially them here in Seattle. So I had to put people around me, because once you're learning, you have to have some intellectual curiosity. You have to have a learning curve. So I put attorneys around me that could explain to me the law here, why it's damaging, why it's the worst in the nation, so that I can understand what I'm dealing with. Because our first attempt at changing the law was Initiative 873, that I partnered with a lady that I thought knew what she was doing, but she didn't, so that it failed. So one of the first things, and let me say this because this is important, one of the first things that you have to do in building a movement when you're trying to run an initiative, which I didn't know until the second time around, is to get a poll. You want a poll with the language that you want to propose to the state. And that requires a poll. Because if you go to funders like Nick Handauer and unions, the first thing they will ask you is, what did the poll say? Well, our first time around, we didn't have a poll. So the poll indicates success. So the second time around, we did a poll. Now, what I didn't realize is the poll was going to cost $40,000. So they're already making it extremely difficult, right? So we end up getting the poll, partnering with another organization called Win-Win. We got a poll, and 75% of the people around the state agreed with the language of changing the law. That is one of the highest percentages that you can get. So we took that poll to funders. We took it to the Puyallup tribe. We took it to Nick Handauer's people. We took that poll, and based upon that poll, I brought all these other organizations into the fold, because every organization based on the poll could see this is something we could win. And they want to be a part of something that could win. But see, all these things, and there's a lot more, we wouldn't even have enough time to go into them. There's so many things that you have to learn. And one of the things is build power. That is not a term that is used in our communities. What is building power? Well, building power is going to, like I said, other communities, and saying that, listen, we've been fighting this separately by ourselves and we've been getting defeated. Let's join together. Because they can beat us individually, but they can't beat all of us. So that was when we joined together and built the biggest people of color coalition. That was the building of power. And once we put that coalition together, right, with politicians, with some law enforcement, with unions, with some white allies, we were an unstoppable powerhouse, right? So this is just some of the things, right? This is just some of the things.
Go ahead.
Yeah. No, go ahead, brother.
That again, thanks for that. Again, as we are in this election season, thank you for explaining that process of creating an initiative, and that's what I want people to hear as well, about how you make change happen. And this is not a gotcha show, so I'm telling you, I'm about to switch the subject right now.
Go ahead, bro.
Again, my guest is Andre Taylor. He is the founder and also the executive director of Not This Time, which you got to hear a little bit more about, and then also the newly hired consultant for the city of Seattle in the position which he chose the title of Street Czar. I read one of the headlines earlier, and I don't, use language just to be gratuitous or sensational, but we're going to have, again, real conversation here. According to Mark Stein, and there are many headlines like this, the city of Seattle hires a former pimp to act as the city's street czar. And the things that people are talking about there is, this brother was a pimp. This nigga was down in Las Vegas making women sell their bodies, taking the money, and afterwards you have a woman who no longer has confidence in herself, no longer has self-esteem. And for some people, that is unforgivable. I mentioned before that America generally loves a redemption story. Now, I'm just saying stuff. I want to give you the opportunity to share. It can either be response to what I said. It could be, Tony, you are completely wrong. But there are people who will associate what you were doing in Las Vegas, and maybe it is the same or maybe it isn't, to that young woman who was selling herself for $40 on Aurora Avenue, who, if she doesn't, is going to face repercussions from her pimp, who is not going to give her any medical benefits, who uses her until she can't be used up anymore. And here you are in this office downtown. I want to give you an opportunity to respond to that.
So let me just give it a little clarity to it, because people talk about things that they think the life is from a movie or from a rap song or something, but they really don't understand that the black community is a subculture. And the game, pimp life, or whatever you want to call it, is a subculture within that. Kind of like the mafia, where there's rules, there's regulations, and there's guidelines, where people choose this vice. Some people choose gangbanging. Some people choose jacking. Some people choose selling drugs. Some people choose hustling. Some people choose pimping. right? It is not an abnormal thing within the black community, right? The dominant society might think a different kind of way only because they're hypocritical, because I'm a black man operating in the context of the sexual industry, but I'm a pimp. But if you put Dennis Huff or Hugh Hefner, and he's a white man, then he's a businessman. Dennis Huff was in the same documentary I was in called American Pimp, and not only did he say that he was a pimp, he said he was the big pimp, right? But HBO gave him a show called The Cat House, right? Hugh Hefner is celebrated by other white men, right? And I remember when I was on Montel Williams' show, and the show was about suburban prostitutes and how pimps are somehow influencing suburban prostitutes. And I told Montel, I said, Montel, there's no pimp epidemic in the country, right? I said, the little black guy or whoever he is not creating those issues for children. I said, if you want to really know where the real influence is legal prostitution. And he said, well, what's that? I said, the porn industry. I said, the porn industry is legal prostitution, but white America will say nothing against the porn industry because it is an industry that produces billions of dollars a year. That's 60 or more % of the internet. But those people have major attorneys, so you won't go after them. So what you want to do is put a black face to an issue, right? And then with your hypocritical idea about what you think it is, plaster his story without taking responsibility for the corporate entities that really run it, that really get the money, that are really the influencers. Now, my mom was in the streets. My father was in the streets. I was birthed out of the lifestyle. I have a different understanding coming up as a child, right? Let me just say, Malcolm X was a pimp. Our beloved Maya Angelou was a prostitute. There's always been stigma with our people with every kind of hustle. So they sick this dog on me today, but brothers coming out of the streets trying to have restorative justice, I can't allow them to discredit my story to make them brothers feel what the hell I should change my life for. I might not never be a published writer. I might never be a street czar, but I know that it's possible. But if the end result is what they're trying to do to Andre Taylor, why the hell are you telling me to change my damn life? So it becomes really hypocritical, right? So I understand it's really racist, really. I'm not excusing the behavior, but I can say the young girl who they say I raped and trafficked was so frustrated with the lies, she actually reached out to media. There is something on her right now on YouTube and on my page I posted of this young girl refuting all that they said, refuting it, right? So true enough, I was hustling. I was out there trying to make it happen. You know, I was dedicated to what I was doing because in these streets, if you're not dedicated, you're going to get your butt ran over or killed. So I was dedicated. I had passion about what I was doing and I believed in what I was doing. That's why my transformation was so solid, because I took that same energy and that same passion to change my life. And I've been married 22 years. That's real.
My guest again is Mr. Andre Taylor of Not This Time. I'm going to switch the subject here, but we're going to stay in kind of the same area. Sure. The word on the street is that the only reason you got this gig is because you're kowtowing to Mayor Durkin and you're supporting Mayor Durkin during a critical time when she needs support. And that's why you got this gig. It's a reward. It's because you are playing to Mayor Durkin. Your response to that?
Bruh, I was facing a life sentence from the most powerful entity in the world, which is the United States government. A life sentence. And it showed right there in the film that I didn't flinch. Most people never have that type of pressure in their whole life. And some people that have had that pressure have become shrinking violence. Why the hell a man that has been thoroughly tested, will I then somehow succumb because somebody is want to give me $150,000 when I was a millionaire in the streets? It's just foolish, right? So the reason why the mayor trusted the abilities of Not This Time, because there is nobody else in the country that have ever brought forth legislation, real legislation, real change. That's why. And all those people and naysayers out there that are talking, Tony, I'm willing to put our work up against their words any day. Put your work up, not your words. What have you done? How have you impacted your community outside of running your mouth? What have you done? And if you haven't done anything, I'm not going to even give you any attention. Bring your work to the table and not your words.
Mr. Andre Taylor of Not This Time. I want to get back to now the position that you have. And I asked you earlier a little bit about this, but what are some of the things that you hope to accomplish from this position? And again, if there is nothing else like this as you're building this blueprint, what is it that you want the blueprint, or have you figured that out yet, to be? So that if this is a position that can be effective in other cities that are having similar problems and can find a similar answer and can find that similar individual, what do you want that to look like? Where do you say 6 months from now, a year from now? And what do you want for folks to see? And maybe you don't care what they see from this position and how this position interacts and whether it becomes successful in doing whatever that thing is that it's supposed to be successful at, so that there's a measurable in place that not just the city can see, but also the public can see as well.
As I've said to you earlier, this is a continuation of the work that Not This Time has been successful doing, right? So we will continue to produce work. The motto of my organization is do the work, right? So it's not that we just popped up out of nowhere. We have a history of creating change that everybody's talking about, right? And I alluded to Big U and others that are also creating change, working with the cities that they live in. That's what the Street Czar position is about, trying to bring the city to an understanding, and then also the community in the streets to an understanding. And if we can have conversations, right, that we haven't been successful at having in the past, then these could lead to some partnering, like Not This Time is partnering with the city, like Big U partners with Los Angeles. So the work is evident going all around the country when you see people that come from the streets, probably did Fed time or jail time, reform their life, and are now creating change, and the city is listening to them for that change. So again, I don't want to belabor the point. This is not about something new necessarily. We have already been doing this work. This is so that we can continue the work of Not This Time, because we are an organization supported, by volunteers. So when you got people like families calling us, our bandwidth is so small. And regardless of what anybody thinks, it takes money and finances to continue to run an organization and to be there for the people. So this is an ongoing process of conversations with the streets, of passing legislation by making Washington State, leading Washington State, and being the first and only state with a police accountability law, changing the inquest process, I was a part of the governor's task force, and I walked away from that because I felt like it was just shenanigans. I felt like the governor wasn't adding any leadership, and he wanted to wait 10 weeks so that, all the pressure could fall away. So I walked away from that because I'm about real change. So it's a continuation of the work we've been doing, is what I'm trying to explain to you.
I'm going to give you a chance. I'm only going to have about a minute left. But, Andre, right now I got to do a shameless plug for the radio station in this conversation. We're about to get off the air. But again, I want to remind you that next week we'll be beginning our 2020 Community Election Connection, Rainier Avenue Radio, your community election connection. We're going to be hosting about 15 different debates on our radio station. We're bringing the candidates to you and connecting you statewide. So whether you live in Clark County or Benton County in Eastern Washington, you can know that there are issues that may be of concern to you that you can hold your elected officials accountable for, and also know that those things may be affecting you no matter what part of the state you live in. We're also going to be providing you information on the electoral process. You'll be hearing from the candidates next week. I definitely want to thank Urban League of Metropolitan Seattle and Seattle Academy of Arts and Sciences, who took the initiative to support this important work that we are doing, that again you can't do for free. And all month long, we'll be doing this. Go to our website. You'll be seeing more information. Our Black Candidate Forum, 3 black women who are running for office in Pierce County. We'll also be having a Black Candidate Forum who are running in King County and then also Snohomish County. So you will be able to hear from these candidates, because you should become an educated and informed voter. Andre, I had to get that in, bruh, but I got about a minute left for you any final words that you would like to communicate with our audience?
Listen, I appreciate the conversation. It took us a minute to get here, and I thought timing is everything. And, again, I'm just going to continue to do the work, and I'll let the work speak for itself.
Mr. Taylor, know that you always have an opportunity to come voice and share your opinion on this radio station.
Thank you, Tony.
Again, I hope you enjoyed this week's edition. Congratulations again to our new street czar, and likewise, you should have the opportunity to hold him accountable for his work as well. Fresh juice is on the way. Again, don't forget about our community election connection. That's it. That's all the time that I have. That's going to do it for the kid. It's me, Tony B., your host of Street Beat, saying, remember, whether you believe you can or whether you believe you cannot, you are probably right. I'm out. Peace.